You know, when you first come out to a forest, all you see are trees, and they all look the same. It's only after you spend time, repeated visits, that you begin to notice the subtle differences in the bark color, in the form of the trees. Um, you begin to notice defects, tops missing, trees that are dead. You notice the differences at the different times of year. You begin to understand the finer scale detail of the forest. And it's that way with anything. Over time, you get more familiar with it and you get a better understanding. Forests are very complex, and I don't believe there's any two forests that are alike, even in the same where the same species are growing and even in the same climates. Each forest has a different story to tell, and actually, don't think I'm crazy here, but I think the forest talks to you. Not in the weird woo-hoo way like Fangorn Forest, Ents talking, but the forest has a story to tell, and each component tells a different story. The trees tell one story, the understory and the brush tell another story. The soil tells a story. Even the landscape itself, the mountains, the shape of the slope, and the aspect in relation to the sun, they all tell a different story, and they're all speaking. Sometimes they're speaking crossways with each other, and sometimes certain elements are happy and other elements are unhappy. And that's really the challenge, is looking at the forest and trying to understand those elements, what they're trying to tell you. What happens all too often is we come into the forest and impose what our will on the forest, or we see only what we want to see instead of what the forest is telling us. I think a lot of problems in my own industry of forestry are like that. We make a lot of decisions based more upon what we need to get out of the forest than necessarily what the forest needs. We have a specific quality and quantity of a certain species or of wood that we need to get out of the forest. It doesn't really matter what the forest wants from us. We basically go in there and they say, well, this is a nice volume stand. We're going to take these trees out, instead of looking at the forest more holistically. And this has really been the domain of the environmentalist, the woohoo, hug a tree, forestry, or not forestry, but environmentalism. Hey, P, that's my dog, Sweet Pea. Yes, you're a good girl. So, but there is a responsibility that we have to the forest. The forest gives us something, and we have to try to give something back to it. If we don't care for the forest and provide for its fundamental needs, there's no way that it can provide for us. So we have to change the way that we look at the forest, and we have to change our relationship to the forest. We have to be willing to invest in the future, to make decisions about the trees that may not necessarily pay off in the short term, but are investments in that long-term component. That means passing over trees that might be really hot in that market right now, or it means doing things to the understory that cost money now but provide a payoff later. We have to do a lot of listening, and we don't do enough of that. We don't do enough of that anywhere in our world. We don't listen to anybody or to anything. We just do what we want to do, and that's the challenge, is to take the time, and we don't. We don't take enough time, because I think the people that do, even those that try, eventually they get frustrated, either that they're not getting an answer or they're not getting the answer that they want. So forests have to be studied. They have to be examined. You have to develop, on some levels, a relationship with the forest so that you can begin to understand how to work with it. It's important that we try not to fight nature, that we work with nature and with the natural processes and the natural flows of energy. And again, not in some woohoo mystical crap way, but there are natural energies. Water flows in certain directions. Sunlight is collected on some slopes and not on others, and that impacts the natural environment. And we have to look at that realistically and bring that into our planning instead of always trying to fight back and fight against it. Even something as simple as brush that's growing up among some of these trees here, and you've got some of these seedlings that are fighting to get out from around the understory, one solution is to spray this with herbicide or to come in with fire or with some kind of mechanical treatment. We have to look at the big picture and understand that those treatments may not be the best thing. They may not be in the best long-term interest of the forest. And that decision and the answer to that is probably going to be different depending on your circumstances. So we can't throw out one treatment over another, but we really have to look at big picture and try to understand what we're doing out here. So that's kind of where I'm coming from, is just the idea of trying to slow down, understand that the forest is complex. The forest has a story to tell if only you will sit down and listen.